Maigavan and Melonin, and welcome to another faction overview video, this time for the Haven of Umbar. The traitors if you are a fan of the Númenóreans, or the righteous and rightful rulers of Gondor if you are part of the faithful. Umbar start very far away from a lot of the action, as you can see from the map here. We are far to the south and encircled entirely by Harad. We do own the small little island of Gobel Tolfalas just to the north, but other than that you've got three main provinces down here in the south around Umbar, with Khaldun and Ardumir. The coast of Umbar, the Cape of Umbar, and the Haven lands of Umbar. And that is the position for Umbar at the beginning, not particularly amazing. And that brings you on to Rebel expansion. Unfortunately, there are no Rebel expansion options for Umbar. There's nowhere to go. You are surrounded. You have no Rebel locations. Your only hope is to build an army here, jump across the ocean, and then try and take this Rebel province here before Dol Amroth get down here, or Harad come up here and take it. And that's about it. Unfortunately, you've got to attack. You've got to attack someone. Be that Harad, be that Dol Amroth, be that Gondor, be that very ambitious all the way up here to Enedwaith. You attack who you like, but you've got to attack someone. Speaking of other factions, your neighbours are going to play a big part in the Haven of Umbar, because, as I say, you're surrounded by them. And your one and only ally are currently the Haradrim tribes. Your enemies with Gondor and your enemies with the Principality of Dol Amroth. And that's about it. Harad does cover your entire border. You're completely surrounded by them. And Dol Amroth are just to the north up here. And Gondor, obviously, is the mainland up to the Twin Osgiliaths, or Osgiliath, and Minas Tirith. Of course, Mordor is just here, and Khand is away to the east, but you'll get to them a little bit later on, because they take a little longer to get to those places. In terms of economy, Umbar actually have quite the potential for earning money, because your homelands are very safe, so they're rarely raided. Umbar itself starts off as a huge city, which is very rare, so that's why, as you can see, it's already getting 2,658, which is quite useful. And also, if you do choose to backstab Harad, the province just here, and Karagmir, is one of the wealthiest in the game, so you can sneak in and get a very strong province just there. But other than that, there's no restrictions to Umbar. You can build anything you want. Along with Gondor, you're one of the few factions that can build anything you want, so you can build what you like. And so economy is quite easy to, not easy to come by, but you have the potential to earn quite a bit of money. Construction wise, as I say, there's no restrictions, and your guilds are just the two, the Fighters Pit and the Warriors Guild. The Fighters Pit is, or Fighters Guild, and Naru and Aru Fighters Guild. They both just increase the experience of troops, as you can see from on the left hand side, and the Warriors Guild increases the melee weapon bonus. You start with the Raiders Guild, and then it becomes the Brotherhood of True Sons, and which again just increases experience. So if you get both guilds, you're just getting your experience increased. Nice little images there from Anno 1404. So let's thank the game creators of that mod. Oh, I still haven't replaced that. I really don't like that image, but oh well, we'll leave it as it is for now. Anyway, that's by the by. Okay, so scripts for Umbar, there are none. There are no scripts whatsoever. If you play against Umbar, of course, there's the raid script, which I covered in the Dol Amroth and Gondor videos. But at Umbar themselves, there's nothing. There is nothing unique. You can call upon the Dark Lord to commission invasions, and that's about it. There's nothing else, unfortunately. If you take Karagmir, you can get Mumakil, and I believe you also do get a script, but more sort of construction related. You get a slave camp, and I can't remember if it's if it works in Harad or if it's the canned one. I think it's the Harad one, actually. I think it's all coming back to me. I wanted to make it so that Umbar had the potential to be good or evil, or essentially the ultimate evil, believing themselves above even Sauron himself, and so essentially going to war with everyone. And I'm fairly certain I popped in a little building whereby you can take Haradrim lands and then build a slave camp and train Haradrim units out of that camp. I know that you can definitely do that for Khand, so if you make it to Khand you can enslave them and train their units, but I'm fairly certain I did a Harad one as well, so an interesting little twist for Umbar if you do take Harad. But other than that, as I say, there's nothing else going on. Now in terms of tips as Umbar, there aren't really any. They're, again, unfortunately, they're one of the easiest factions because no one unless you turn against them, no one will attack your homeland. And by them, I of course mean Harad. So unless you attack Harad, your homeland will be safe for the entire game. There'll be no threats. You'll face no challenges. So you have a safe base by which to just sail out and attack wherever you want. So I'm loath to give any tips because I feel the campaign is easy enough on its own anyway. So what I would suggest is just have fun with it. Do what you like. Jazz it up. It's quite easy to conquer most of the known world as Umbar, so go for it. Your actual objectives are to destroy Gondor, destroy the Principality, and destroy Lindon, and to claim 40 regions. So if you are attempting to actually win, you will at some point have to sail all the way north, all the way up past everything to the Gulf of Lune, and take Lindon. But because Lindon will vastly outclass you in the early game, that is not something you're going to be doing for quite some time. So you're not going to be attacking them anytime soon. And because of the small stature of Umbar's campaign holdings, that concludes the first half of the video, actually. So we dive into their custom data, but this is where Umbar really shine. Obviously, Umbar are a faction added by DAC, so they are a DAC exclusive faction. They're represented in other mods by, I think some mods do give a few units from Umbar itself, and obviously the Corsairs are a unit even for Harad in the base game. But them as a fleshed out faction is a DAC initiative. Initiative sounds so commercial. And they have been heavily edited and updated by Zarathos over his tenure with us, as you can see by all the little pictures and whatnot. For those of you who have been with us since the very beginning can remember what Umbar used to look like, you'll realise how much of an improvement it is now. But obviously many of you will, where we are now, many of you probably won't even remember what Umbar used to look like. So your knowledge of Umbar is just what Zarathos has given you. So we can have a look at that now. A quick glance shows you obviously that they're not a cavalry faction. Not in the slightest, with only those 2 cavalry on the side being their actual cavalry. And they're both very, very weak camel units, which we will discuss shortly because they become in the first tier. Alright, here is your first tier. Made up almost solely of Corsairs. And then in the next tier come the Belegar. Oh no, not them. Belegar, there they are. The Rangers. They come in the next tier. And then at the top tier are the Naru and Aru, which I am told from the description of them from when I joined DAC. Apparently Naru and Aru means royal or something like that. I'm afraid I don't speak any Adonaic. I've never studied Adonaic. I don't know anything about it other than the odd word comes through. So if it does mean what it means, then cool. But if not, then who knows? I'm fairly certain it says in here. Oh yeah, there you go. Naru and Aru, which is Adonaic for king's men, apparently. So there we are. But anyway, let's look at the units. So the camels. Now the camel men, the camel archers, and the camel riders are essentially borrowed from Harad, but I'll cover them in this video instead of the Harad video. But they are for Harad and for Umbar. They initially were given to Umbar, that's why I've got them in this video, but then we gave them to Harad as well, but obviously they look rather like they are Harad units that Umbar have stolen. But their stats are poor, very, very poor. Camel riders, attack of 3, which is weak initially, a charge of 5, that's nothing special for a horse unit. Their defense is 11, so it's not too bad, but you tend to find that camels are quite weak, they die quite easily. Obviously because they are camels, they have a bonus against horses and mounted units anyway, because camels hard-coded in the files is that camels are get a bonus against horses because they scare them. But these ones also get a bonus against just horses in general, and particularly the Amrothian Swan Cavalry, which is the cavalry used by the bodyguards and the Knights of the Silver Swan. So they are sort of your cavalry killers, aside from your pikemen, who we'll cover in a moment. But they are essentially your cavalry killers.
Haradrim Cavalry, horsemen.
Oh, they've got a very sinister voice.
Haradrim Cavalry,
Very sinister. So those are your camel riders. Not very good. They come in the game very, very early. They're very cheap, which is quite a nice little feature, but they're not really reliable. They chase down routing units is your best bet. The next up are your camel archers. Now these are obviously better because they're mounted archers, and mounted archers are just phenomenal. They're really, really useful because you can keep them out of battle very easily, and obviously they can fire while on the move. So even though they have a low missile attack of only 2, their usefulness speaks for itself basically. So a very, very useful unit, but as you can see, a terrible defense of 3. Their melee attack's only 4 and their charge is 5. So they're more aggressive than they are defensive, but they're still nothing special. And then obviously you can have a little look at all that. They're poor morale response, and then there's the other features there as well. Next up are Corsair archers.
Corsair archers. Archers of the Corsairs.
Who also have very sinister voices. And they can hide anywhere, which is a nice little feature. It means the Corsairs are one of the only units that you get as Umbar who can actually spring effective ambushes. They might charge without orders though, so they can deal with morale shocks quite well, but they're quite aggressive in melee. Otherwise, their stats are nothing special to speak of. 2 melee, 2 charge, 2 missile, defense of 3. Nothing amazing there. And additionally, all Corsair units, which are Corsair Raiders, Corsair Savages, Corsair Pikemen, Corsair Archers, they all need coastal regions. So you can only get them if you own a coastal settlement, and that's predominantly because they are mariners and men of ships. They're not really land units. But there's their stats there, you can have a look at that as well. Again, morale, not very good, very poor morale. So Corsair Archers, a nice unit to pepper the enemy with, and useful that they can hide anywhere, but they're nothing really to shout about. Right, the Pikemen are really the first useful unit as the Corsairs.
Corsairs. Corsairs of Umbar.
And that's because there's 202 of them, and they can form a solid pike wall. They can do a lot of damage to cavalry who have gone on a bad charge or mislaid their charge. How can you mislay your charge? They can do a lot of damage to cavalry that's not paying attention, basically. Again, they might charge without orders, so a feature of the Corsairs is that whilst their morale is poor, they deal very well with morale shocks, and that comes from their aggressiveness, really, their desire to kill without thought or care for themselves. Stats, nothing particularly to scream about. 2, 5, 3, again, not really that great. Interesting to note that so far none of these units have had shields, so they're very susceptible to arrow fire, and that speaks true of all the Corsairs. That's the number one way to kill them, speaking as a veteran Dol Amroth player. I never really engage these in melee. I always either just charge them down with cavalry, and then I rain hell on the Corsair pikemen, and it always does the job.
Corsairs of Umbar.
Right, the Raiders are the mainstream unit, but again, no shield. So their attack is 4, which is quite good. They've got quite an aggressive attack for such a less than militia style unit. And again, the similar feature, poor morale, but with an impetuous morale response. No bonus against anything else, and again, they need the coast. But they're none of these units are anything amazing to shout about, but they're very cheap and there's a lot of them. So they're similar to orcs in that sort of regard. And the other early tier unit are the Corsair Savages. The Corsair Savages are strike infantry and act very much like a berserker would. They have terrible defense. Their defense is 7, so their defense isn't actually that bad, but the reason I say it's so terrible is, of course, because they have no armor and no shield. They are incredibly susceptible to arrow fire and will fall very easily against enemy archer fire. So you have to watch out for that. But other than that, they're effective against armor. They frighten nearby enemy infantry, and they have an 8 attack with a 6 charge, which means they're so good on the attack, but not that great in prolonged melee, and they will fall by the 1,000 if you send them against archer fire. But unlike the rest of their comrades, they have average morale with an impetuous morale response, so they are quite formidable units. And interestingly, because they have no armor, you have to remember that when a unit goes from no armor to 1 armor through the blacksmith, apparently that is the equivalent of gaining 4 points of defense, even though the game will only show 1. So they can potentially go straight from none to 4, sorry. And that is your first tier. These are all available early in the game. Right, the middle tier. This is where Umbar's look starts to just be amazing, and it shines through. Easily, in my opinion, Zarathos's pinnacle work, closely followed by Khand. The Belagars, especially when they're upgraded. Just wait till you see them upgraded. I don't know how you're going to be able to see them upgraded. Oh, if I do an Umbar Let's Play, you'll see them. They get the coolest mask you've ever seen, and it covers... Oh, they're words. Words is how I describe that. But anyway, start at tier 2. Castamir's Rangers.
Ready. Rangers, ready.
Rangers, ready. They are, as you'd expect, Rangers, wearing the red that you can see there. As with all Rangers, they can hide... Well, not all Rangers, but most Rangers, I think, can hide anywhere. They can use sharpened stakes. They're obviously reliable in woods. But the flip side with most of these types of units is that they're good in deserts. So as you saw from most of the Corsairs, their bonus is in desert. And then most of these units' negative is that they're not very good in snow. But otherwise, they're normal everywhere else. And the Rangers are the same. They get a bonus in desert and forest. They have no negative fighting attributes, so they're going to be good everywhere, but they do require a woodland region to train, and unfortunately in the deserts of Harad, woodland is very sparse, so you won't really get these unless you start invading somewhere where there's actually trees. So Ithilien, Enedwaith, even the lands of Harlond and Harlinden, are wooded, so you won't really get these in your homeland, but you'll get them elsewhere. But as I say, they can hide anywhere. The defense is 13, which is quite good for archer units, and that's reminiscent of almost all Rangers. They tend to have a medium or a middling armor defense. Their melee is 7, so they're quite aggressive, which is good. They're good on the attack. Their charge is not very good though, so they're good. They can sustain melee, but they're not very good initially. But their missile of 6 is where they shine, and very, very good missile, especially compared to these two, which both have a 2 missile, and then in the middling you can get the Rangers. So straight away you've got a great bonus. As with almost any faction, we've tried to make it so that if you can train Rangers, you should always train Rangers, because they are often far, far greater than any other archers you might be able to get. So you can have a little read of their stats. They've got excellent stamina as well. Their morale is only good, and their morale response is only good though, so they're very good archers, but try to keep them out of battle.
We are ready to strike.
Right, of this tier, the first unit you'll come across are the Corsair Warriors, and there's a possibility that they might be available in the early one. I can't quite recall. These are a bit of an anomaly. They're the Corsairs, but they're the armoured version of the Corsairs. But again, they require a coastal region. 11 defense, 6 attack, 3 charge, so they bridge the gap between a Corsair Raider and then essentially an armoured Corsair, and that's what they are. They've got that ferocity in their attack with actually having a defense worth speaking about. As you will also see, their morale is average and their morale response is impetuous again, so they've got a better morale than their comrades, but still nothing amazing, but they have got some morale that they're going to fight. Right, then there are two distinct tiers of Belagar units. There are Belagar archers, Belagar footmen, and then Belagar defenders and Belagar marksmen. And the footmen and the archers are the first tier, and then the marksmen and the defenders are the second tier. So we'll start with the footmen.
Wait for battle.
These are the footmen. These are her Umbar's first mainstream dependable unit. They're not going to flee too easily, and they're going to fight for quite a while. Same sort of defense as the Corsair Warriors. Similar sort of attack, but obviously they have a shield and a spear. So they are defensive while the Corsair Warriors are attacking at this tier. They can hide. They're adept at hiding in wood, so they get a slight bonus at hiding in woods. That's the middle tier of wood hiding abilities. They can make a shield wall, and they have again average morale, but average morale response as well. So nothing amazing, but they're the first unit that you can actually rely on. You'll find that the Corsairs are quite weak, and you can't really rely on them for much. But you can rely on the Belagar footmen. And their archer equivalent are the Belagar archers, who are just dependable is the way you'd sum them up. But again, their defense is 6, so nothing amazing, but still nothing terrible. Their missile attack is 3, which is good for a non-elven faction. With missile damage, you don't really go huge jumps. You do just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So an increment of 1 or 2 is often quite a big difference. Their melee though is not wonderful, neither is their charge. So these are the epitome. These epitomise everything that's good and bad about archers. There's a reasonable number of them to pepper the enemy. They've got reasonable abilities like flaming arrows, and they're reliable in deserts. Their morale's not too bad, but as with all archers, they're awful in combat, or as with most archers, they're awful in combat, so you want to try and keep them ranged at all times. Interesting little nautical themed hats, or hats, makes them sound so childish. Interesting nautical themed helmets, I should say, that you can see them donning there, with different patterns on different helmets, just very, very cool. Alright, and then the tier just above that, so the Belegar marksmen and defenders are sort of like middle, halfway between that second and halfway between that top tier. And we'll start with the footmen, or the defenders, sorry. First thing that you'll note about them is they've got a massive shield. And they also use a mace. One of the only units in the game, actually, that uses a mace. It's a very, very rare weapon. But the defenders, as the name would suggest, are very defensive. And that shines through with their 20 defense. A 5 shield point. 5 shield point is normally only used for elite units. So it's showing that their skill with a shield plus a large shield gives them a big bonus. Their armor is 10 on its own. But to counter their very high defensive stats, their attack is only 5 and their charge is only 2. But they are effective against armor thanks to the bludgeoning and crushing nature of the mace. Excellent stamina as well. They are very, very good defensive units, but you don't really want to waste them on an attack unless obviously your whole army is attacking. But otherwise, keep them in defense where they shine very, very well. Good morale and good morale response to boot as well. And they are supplemented by the Belegar marksmen. Belegar marksmen, similar sort of defense as their comrades. 1 less armor, 1 less shield, of same defense skill. They do have a shield when they go into battle. You can see it slung over their shoulders just there. So they do fight with a shield. And their missile attack is also 6. So same missile attack as the Castamir's Rangers. These are very good archer units, very all-round archer units. The 2 Belegar upper units are characterized by being all-round. That is how I would describe them. They're all-round. They're good at almost everything they try and do. And particularly these 2 units are the ones you want defending. So if Umbar is under attack, these are the ones you want on your front lines and on the walls of Umbar. You can have a little read there of that. Again, good morale and good morale response, and then there's the archer stats beneath it. Right, and then that brings you to your elite tier. Now this is unique for... Umbar are one of the few evil factions, along with Run and... not Isengard to an extent, but mostly just Run. They're one of the few evil factions who actually have reliable and very heavily armoured elite units. The armour level that these guys field is up there with Gondor and Dol Amroth and even some of the elves and dwarves, and that is to reflect their Númenorian heritage. And because obviously the only real interesting thing about Umbar is when it was owned by Dark Númenorians and then by Castamir's surviving forces. When it just mixed with Harad, it got a bit boring. So most people patch over that and keep them a bit more Dark Númenorian than really they probably should be. And that's reflected in their armour style and their strength. But we start at the elites with the Belegar Swordmasters. Now these, whilst completing the trio of marksmen, footmen and defenders, and swordmasters, because their attack is so high, I believe they come in a little later. They are strike infantry, but armoured strike infantry. So no shield, so a bit susceptible to arrow fire, but defense skill of 5 again and an armour of 8. And their defense overall comes to 13. But where they shine is their high attack of 12 with a charge of 6. But do note that they're not effective against armour. So it's a raw and high attack, but it's not supplemented with armour effectiveness. And they have good morale and good morale response. Umbar's units are, in terms of money, a bit of a mixed bag. In the early tier, they're cheap as you like. They are very, very cheap, verging on Snagger and Orc level cheap. But then there's quite a steep jump up to their upper units, and then a very steep hike up to their elites. So they don't have one size fits all where every unit is cheap for its tier. Their elite units are very expensive. Their middle units are quite expensive. And their base units are very, very cheap. So that's why their armies do often have 1 or 2 elites outnumbered by quite a lot of poor. And then you use the poor units to tie up the enemy, and you send in your elites in decisive locations. The Naru and Aru Royal Guard are the next up. These are your proper elites. They are shields and spears, and they are very, very elite, as you can see from their stats. They inspire nearby troops. They frighten nearby enemy infantry. They can make a shield wall. They're effective against cavalry. They have a 34 defense and an attack of 12 and a charge of 4. They are very strong units. Their morale is average, but it's locked, which is a point to note. They will never flee. However, they are only available. I don't know why it's not written there. I must have accidentally not saved it when they were when I wrote their description all those months ago. But they are only available in the 3 main regions of Umbar. You can't get them everywhere. So they're available in is it Ardamir, Khaldun, and Umbar itself. And supplementing the incredible Naru and Aru Royal Guard are the Naru and Aru Royal Archers. Very similar stats, except their shield is obviously a bit worse, and their defense skill is not as good. Oh, they're their bodyguards. So their armor's 18, but their armor's 20. Their defense skill is 6, but their defense skill is 8, and their shield is 4, but their shield is 6. So there's 6 worse, 2 in each category. But their melee attack is 10, so still very, very good. Charge of 4, not too bad, but the missile is 7. So they're going to bring down a lot of enemies with their bows, and then once they've done that, they're going to bring down even more in melee. Again, they inspire nearby troops, so very, very good elite units that Umbar can call on. The AI rarely gets to the point where it can actually call on these 2 sets of units, but if you as a human can, you'll find quickly that they're very, very strong. Easily counterable to the elven units you'll face, and indeed trouncing even the best units of Gondor. Excuse me, sorry. Now, these are the bodyguard units, the Naru and Aru Household Guard. Very, very similar stats to the Royal Guard, but they are slightly weaker. 32 defense, 10 attack. Skilled against mounts, frighten nearby enemy infantry. Their morale is excellent, but it's not locked, so do bear that in mind. But they do have their own look as well, which is interesting. So they're not just a carbon copy of a normal unit and then given a different name. They are their own unit, and they look very, very cool with very, very good quality shields as well, which is one thing to note. Very, very rare that a shield would ever be that good. And then finally you have Castamir's Chosen. Castamir's Chosen have been in the game for a very long time. They used to have a very, very, very peculiar look, but they've since been edited, as you can see before you now, and now they look very dependable indeed. Sorry, excuse me. These are arguably one of your best units, maybe trounced only by the Naru and Aru Royal Guard. They have excellent stamina. They can make a shield wall. The defense is 28. 15 of that is their armor. So they're not going to drop to arrow fire very easily. Their attack is also 12 and their charge is 4, so again good features there. Sorry, excuse me, I'm yawning. Their morale is excellent, but it is not locked, so do bear that in mind. And their morale response is impetuous. So they're going to deal with morale shocks very, very, very well. A lot better than the Royal Guard would. Additionally, the Castamir's Chosen, in stats that you don't see, they attack faster than the Naru Royal Guard, so they have the bonus there, and they have slightly higher mass, I believe, so they can punch through an enemy line a bit stronger. So you do basically have 3 units of the same tier, just with an aggressive, a defensive, and an archer, or defensive, archer, and aggressive, but they look slightly different and they have a different name. And that's about all there is to keep in mind with them. And that is the roster of Umbar, a very, very, very good looking roster, and if you can get to the late game, and very, very strong roster. Very few opponents can actually match Umbar in the late game. Unfortunately, Umbar as the AI never get to the late game, so that's why no one really ever sees these units in battle or in the games, because they just don't get there on their own. And that's due to their locked-in nature. But then there are some factions which are just not designed really to be played by a human, or designed really to be only be played by a human, and Umbar are certainly one of them. Let's send our cavalry in over there, see if they can do some damage. They won't, of course, because even though the camels get a bit of a bonus against the Swan Knights, they will get absolutely massacred by the incredibly high attack that the Swan Knights will field. And they won't be able to stop that, unfortunately. But let's take a look at what we are fighting against. Sorry, I was looking around for my room. There's Dol Amroth pikemen coming through the line in the middle there. Some Gondor militia. Haven Guard. Knights of the Tirith Ayar. Knights of the Silver Swan. Squires. Oh, White Knights. White Knights always look very cool. And they're all going to hit our line. Is everybody ready? Oh, those cavalry have hit and absolutely slaughtered something. Oh, the Household Guard. Keep up the fire, men. All of the archers firing. There's the Rangers. Where's the Rangers? Right at the end. That's what they look like when they stand up. With the insignia of Umbar blazoned on their chest. They are obviously a heavy counterpart to the Ithilien Rangers, but I noticed in a few mods there are dark Rangers for Umbar, but they are just Ithilien Rangers with a slightly darker tunic, and so I'm very pleased that Zarathos edited those to actually look different. Very pleased indeed. Unfortunately, because I gave Dol Amroth in this battle almost all of their elite units, they will destroy us. Although they are holding their maces in a very peculiar fashion, aren't they? As long as they attack like a normal sword. I was worrying then that their animation might be a spear attack, even though they have a mace. Or maybe that's just the mace animation. Because as I say, hardly anyone in the game actually uses a mace. And so I've never seen them fight. And I think that might just be the mace animation, so we'll leave them like that. Some sort of ninja stance they've got going. Belagar Swordmaster's getting pushed back by the pikemen. We are getting utterly trounced, I'm afraid. But obviously that's because I take one of all of our units and then I randomly choose a strong enemy unit to fight against. And Dol Amroth, I went a bit gun-ho with the Knights of the Silver Swan and the Talon Knights. So carving
Our
through
general
us.
shames us all. He flees battle while his soldiers still fight.
The general's running away. And he is now dead. But anyway, that will conclude the Umbar video. So I hope that you've got some information from this and it's been helpful and useful. Do remember that Umbar are a DAC only faction, so if you're watching these videos and playing the base game, then you won't see Umbar in the game, and nor will you see any of these units. But if you're playing DAC, of course, they are away to the far south. So if you have any qualms, questions or queries, as always, post them on the video itself or head over to Total War Center or indeed ModDB. I do hope you all thoroughly enjoy the
We've lost half of our men.
version 0.52, which was released on the same day that this video was recorded, but I don't think the same day as this video has gone up on YouTube. So do enjoy that. Do report back on that if there's any problems or issues with that. But for now, thank you very much for watching, if indeed you have. I'm Arachír Galudirithon, the head of Divide and Conquer, and until then, next time, Navar Naden Pedemad Melonin, and farewell.